So I am of the mindset that the Red album was actually Taylor Swift's crossover album, but she just didn't tell the world until 1989. 1989, the album, not the year, is officially her crossover album. And it was fun and awesome. And so The Pour is going to be fun and awesome. But before I tell you about The Pour and all the things, hello, I'm Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. How's it going, Sudsers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things. You are here for day 194 of 365 days of soap and day 5 of 10 of our Taylor Swift fangirling. And we are making the 1989 album. Now, 1989 was Taylor Swift's 5th album, right? And it was her first official crossover into a different genre. She's leaving country completely. Again, I think she left country completely with Red, but she announced it officially with 1989, and this was her, again, the crossover album. And so she was hitting different markets at that point. More eyes were on her, and from both sides, because you have your country fans that you still want to, take along for the ride, but then also you're getting your pop and your, so there's a lot of pressure. And interestingly, in the 1989 liner notes, so she does this thing on her albums, right, where she'll hide little messages in each of the lyrics of all the songs. And, sometimes they're fun, like Maple Latte in Red, and other times they just spell things out. In this one, though, it was actually really cool because in the 1989 album, she wasn't leaving little one-word things that were song specific, although each of the ones were still song specific. She left clues that ultimately became, if you read it in totality, a poem. And it's cool. And one of the lines that she wrote in the liner that she hid in the liner notes was, and everyone was watching. And I love that. And it really falls in line with the, in the Lover House, the Lover video, the blue room where she's in the fishbowl or whatever during, that scene, everyone was watching. And interestingly, in that video, right, her lover is climbing in to the fishbowl, but there's not a way to get out. And so it's essentially saying anyone who comes along with me for this ride, you're stuck here too. And I think she explores a lot of that within 1989, as well as exploring just having fun and being a typical 20-something, which is cool. So for that reason, the soap itself is made with a Prosecco because I feel like bubbly is required for this really fun album. And we are gonna be working with a Polaroid, on the album cover. And it's sort of an interesting pour. Now, I am going to be doing my drunk history of Taylor Swift while doing the voiceover for the pour, but the pour itself looks like maybe I was drunk anyway, because I had a lot of problems, and I'm going to stop talking about those problems, and you're going to go watch the video and let me know whether or not I failed for the first time yet with the Taylor Swift albums. Okay, my drunk history Taylor Swift of 1989, the album, not the year, because I was not even close to it. I mean, I was a child in 1989, so we're not drinking at that point. But, the album, 1989, and look at that little cardboard thing there. I'm going to do a sculpted layer, and we're going to work with blues because blue is the 1989 room in the Lover House. It's blue, the fishbowl and all the things. And yeah, that's the plan. We're gonna work with some trees in this. Now, the extra awesome that I put in the life solution for this is a Prosecco. And because I felt that was very fitting for 1989 was a Prosecco. And that is also what I am drinking for my drunk history of Taylor Swift today, really. And I prepared the side rails ahead of time, like the white pieces there on the right. I made a cold process batch that was thin, and so that's for the side rails of the Polaroid. And again, we're doing trees through the middle because Out of the Woods is, there are a lot of like wood and like woods references throughout 1989 anyway. And so I had this idea that for the 1989 bar, since I'm doing a Polaroid, we could do a different pour inside of the Polaroid to make a different picture each time we do it. And I'm going to start with Out of the Woods because I love that song, and you know, the whole trees and they are the hunters and we are the foxes and all the things. Yes. And so that's what we are doing. Again, Prosecco going into this. The scent blend for this is a dupe for a Tom Ford scent that I quite love, which is the Santal Blush. And I love the Santal Blush. It is so good. So it has some really good like earthy notes to it, right? But also just a hint of, I don't know, like there's just a little bit of flirty going on with it. And so I like that and thought it was very fitting for 1989. 1989 is an interesting album because in some ways I can lift it out of the whole Taylor Swift anthology, right? Like if you're just talking about all of the Taylor Swift albums, 1989 for me is the one that's like, oh, well, we don't need that one. But that's not exactly accurate, right? And the reason it's not exactly accurate is because when I start to listen to the 1989 album, which is what I'm doing right now as I'm pouring this soap, and this soap, by the way, for every one of the albums that I've done, every soap, I have put on that album. So I'm in the shop, people are shopping and doing the things, and the album is playing. And that's not a new thing. That's not a weird thing. Anyone who knows me or my shop and like has gone into my shop understands that you are either going to be listening to Taylor Swift or Hamilton when you're there if I am there. And that's the thing. So it's not weird that Taylor Swift has been playing, but I specifically tell Alexa to play this album while I am pouring the bar. And for this particular pour, like it took so long because it was such a disaster, like such a disaster. The whole thing, it was so bad that by the time I was finally finished, there was silence in the shop. The album had done its thing. It was gone. And that album's what, like 45 minutes long? And it was gone. It was done. There was no more 1989 playing. It was just silence. And so that's an awkward time in retail, right? Because customers are coming and going, and I am pouring this bar and saying, hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. Check out the new stuff and all of the things while I am pouring this bar, and there is silence. There is no background noise. There's nothing. That's how long this pour took, because that's how much of a disaster it all was. But again, back to the point of that, I put on the 1989 album. Every time I put on the 1989 album, I will walk into it going, this is the throwaway album. And then I put it on and go, oh no, I love these songs. I love them. So Welcome to New York, you know, that's a thing, and it's cool and it's awesome and whatever, but, and that's the first song, right? And that's sort of her whatever, but the Blank Space, that song was delightful. Style, that song was amazing. Bad Blood, like, oh god, you're gonna get in a fight with Katy Perry. You're gonna do the thing, and that's cool because I don't really like Katy Perry, but you know, whatever. Out of the Woods, The New Romantics, I mean, like, so many amazing songs on this album. So you can think at the beginning, yeah, that can be the throwaway album. But in reality, when you actually start listening to it, it's not the throwaway album at all. It is still ranking up there with all of the rest of them. And so that's awesome. And yeah, so 1989, it came out in 2014, right? And at that point in my life, because again, we are doing my drunk history of Taylor Swift, when this came out, Soap and Clay Kidlet number 2 was a few months old. And so at this point, I had 2 kids under the age of 2. And because they're spaced about 18 months apart. And I don't know how many of you are parents, but during those early years of parenting, time doesn't matter. It's not a thing. It's much like 2020. It's much like right now. Time is, yeah, it's all arbitrary. So I did not know how long it had been between albums for her, right? Since the Red album, because I had 2 kids under the age of 2, and it was all a thing. But I think the first single that came out on that was Shake It Off. And I remember putting that on my Facebook page, and I very rarely actually post to my personal Facebook page these days, and even then, back in 2014. But I posted the video to Shake It Off because I saw it and I went, yes, I'm raising daughters and this is good. Look at her. This is so, it's such a positive message. It is, yeah, just don't worry about it. People, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like what you do. Just shake it off. And like the self-deprecation that she sort of experienced, that she sort of exhibited in that music video was delightful. Like, you are an artist, Miss T Swizzle. Like, you are in all ways. And I think she had said at one point that if she did not go into music, she wanted to do marketing. And I think that makes sense for her because she has marketed herself so well, including the self-deprecation and all of the things and the making fun of herself at every stage of it all worked. And I loved Shake It Off. I thought it was a great song, and I would dance around with that with with Soap Play Kill It number 2, strapped to me, but the Soap Play Kill number 1, yeah, look at that. Look, this is my life. So this is the inside of the Polaroid picture, right? And I had problems with the, oh God, it's so bad. I had problems with the cardboard pull through for the sculpted layer, right? Because it was a very thick batter and you're trying to pull essentially a lot of soap through, and I wasn't patient, so I didn't wait enough time. Whatever. And so ultimately what I ended up having to do with this pour was literally I'm taking butter knives and I am moving the soap batter as I put in some gray and white on the side walls. And it's not at all what I was going for, but I am, I'm this far into the pour, I'm committed, so I'm gonna do the thing. And it is the most Bush League pour ever. But I made it work, and that's I don't know if I made it work. We're gonna see in the cut if I made it work, because at this moment I'm going, this is terrible. Why am I need to abandon ship, stop, change your plan and do something else. And I didn't do that. I'm like, no, we're doing woods, we're doing trees, because out of the woods. And yes, and so I'm doing this. But yeah, so when you have 2 kids that are under the age of 2, in the early years of parenting, time stops. And so this album came out and I did not purchase it because time stops. Your life at this point in child raising is trips to the park and the zoo and reading Goodnight Moon and The Hungry Caterpillar 9,000 times and explaining to your children who are barely talking or are just barely born, what grass is and the color of the sky and all of the randomness that you do with your kids. It's not paying attention to when albums come out. But we were living out of Colorado at this point, and we flew home a few months after this was released for either Thanksgiving or Christmas. And it was the same trip that I had to make for the, yeah, give it the old college try. We're gonna see if we can make something out of this disaster of a bar. It is, whew, it's so bad. This is such a, yes. So we were flying home to see my parents for the holidays, and my family, and my brother and his wife and their kids, and or kid at that point. And it was a few months after this album had been released, and I knew would be making the same drive that I made when I first discovered, you know, T-Swizzle in the first place. This 4-hour drive that, you know, doesn't have radio. It doesn't have, well, at this point it didn't have radio, but it also doesn't have cell service, so you need something else for background noise. And as we were driving through, I went, let's download the 1989 album. There's a new Taylor Swift album. And so Mr. Soap and Clay downloaded it on his phone. And to this day, he still has this on his phone, like many iterations of, you know, his iPhones later. This is still one of his albums that exists on his phone because we downloaded it on his phone because mine was not charged and whatever. And we listened to 1989 on the way home to see my family. And it was delightful. Like, this was her crossover album, right? Like, this was the first thing that she was officially saying, I'm not country anymore. I'm going to branch out and I'm going to do the crossover thing. And it was a fun album. And this pour, by the way, not fun. There was nothing fun about this. And so the drawing in, the writing in of the Are We Out of the Woods at the end of this was oh so very fitting, because I was so ready to be done with this bar at this point. Like, again, the shop is silent. It's that awkward silence. Shoppers are shopping in silence, because the whole album, the entirety of 1989, had finished well before I was done with my stupid butter knives and all of the things to make the trees and whatever. So I'm like, are we out of the woods? Are we done? So the cut of the 1989 bar, Are We Out of the Woods, was very nerve-wracking for me. I was excited / not excited to see what was inside of this bar, just overall, because it was a disaster to pour. And that's, you know, kind of terrible, because again, we listened to this album going to Colorado to visit my family, and it was a delightful album. And as I, see, now that totally works. That totally works. Because here's the thing, like the 1989, it's very hipster, right? Like there's a lot of weird hipster stuff, which might be the reason why I'm like so quick to discount it. But then again, when I listen to the songs, I'm like, no, you can't discount this. I saw Taylor Swift, the Reputation tour, in person live. I was on the floor. I was 5 rows away. It was freaking amazing. And she played Style. She did Style, and I cried. I wept. I mean, I cried through the whole thing, so it doesn't really, whatever. But anyway, this is very all hipster-esque, and like the Polaroids and the throwbacks and the, you know, take pictures of your childhood room. Although I don't think that's actually on the album. It's just a theme that she was, whatever. The album cover is a Polaroid. And so that actually totally works, because how many Polaroids, like for the people who, like, I know Polaroids are popular now because, again, hipsters, but how many Polaroids do you remember taking when you were a kid that just came out shitty, right? The pictures were terrible. And so for like that whole vibe, that super works. Like, it, in a weird way, it's completely perfect. And yeah, so even though that pour sucked, it's a good first iteration, a good first blush at the 1989 bar, because again, Polaroids, they sucked. They weren't good pictures. Like, we're so spoiled now with the pictures that we can take on our phone, and we can take 9,000 of them in a row, and oh, we don't like that one, we don't like, and we find the perfect one, and then that's the Insta-worthy, you know, whatever. And I decided with this, because on the album cover, right, it's this Polaroid of T-Swizzle, and she has this like shirt with like a bird or something on it, whatever. And then underneath, it's like she wrote on the underneath part, TS 1989, right? That's the album cover. And so I thought it would be fun to really drive the point home that A, was a Polaroid, and two, that it was a 1989 bar, to, you know, do the same thing. But I'm not going to draw, I'm not going to carve all of this, because I have, you know, stamps. So why would I do that? To go ahead and put in the year that soap and clay became a thing, because it's TS 1989, the year that she was born, the year she became a thing. And so I'm gonna go soap and clay 2015, the year that, you know, I became a thing, and soap and clay became a thing. I mean, I've always been a thing. I mean, not like a Taylor Swift thing. She's fabulous, but you know, I'm cool too, just not fabulously cool. And so, yeah, I thought for the soap, it would be cool to do that and really drive home the whole, this is the 1989 bar. And then that really seals the deal, right? It makes it the perfect bar, even though the internal, like, Polaroid picture itself was terrible. There are no woods there. Super abstract. Just look at it, like, just squint, tilt your head. Maybe you can see some woods. There's whatever. It's cool. That totally worked. And the scent is beautiful. I am loving that we're doing like the dupes for like fancy perfumes, because that fits. And you know, Tom Ford and Joe Alwyn and Taylor Swift, and it's all a thing. It all totally works out. So this scent blend was kind of perfect for 1989. And I love that. That was a happy accident or whatever, and it worked. It was a disastrous pour and a successful end, and that is day 194, the 1989 bar. So, like, it still totally works. It was an absolute disaster with the inside and I mean, I was using like butter knives and some bush league stuff right there, but it also worked because with Polaroids, right, like, they're never good pictures anyway. And the actual album itself, the cover of the album, it's like, it's a Polaroid, right? And so half of her face is cut off, because that's just what you get with old photos and all the things. Like, you have to expect that they're all going to kind of suck, and that's kind of the beauty and the character of all of it. It's very hipster. And yeah, so I think it still works. And then the stamping, this one doesn't have the black inside of it, but the stamping with the, you know, SC20 for when I was created, when soap and clay was created, I think that was fun. The scent blend is actually really great. So this is a dupe for a Tom Ford perfume called Santal Blush, and it's delightful. It's a little bit musky, but still has some flirty notes with all of it, and I think it really fits. It has enough of the wood tone that, you know, doing the exploration within the out of the woods yet and all that, I think it's kind of perfect for the bar. Super happy with it all around. I was not happy while I was pouring it, but it was cool, you know, in finished form. And so I love it. And that does it for the 1989 bar. If you love it and would like a copy of your own, you can find it at soapandclay.com in a few days. Once we are done with all of the rest of the videos and all of the rest of the crazy Taylor Swiftums, I will be releasing them all at the same time. So you can check out the website in a few days for that. And if you're interested in the social media things, I am there, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And if you're interested in more soapy antics, you should subscribe. We have a few more days left in this Taylor Swift thing, and things get a little crazy from 1989 on, right? Like, her life goes into different places. I mean, not bad places. She's still fabulous and awesome. It's just, you know, there's a lot of drama. And so that's a thing. And we will be exploring that within the pours, you know, following this one, really. So you should stick around, subscribe, and come back and do the things. For those of you who are subscribed, you're awesome. Thank you so much for being subscribed. I love my sudsers, and I love that you've been here for the Taylor Swift stuff, and I hope you continue to be here. Come back tomorrow, because it's Reputation, and Reputation's crazy. So yes, come check it out. And that does it for me today. And again, I'll see you guys all again tomorrow for Reputation. Bye.